All right, everybody, our guest this week on Top of the Morning is a very close friend of TopRopeReport.com. You can catch him coming up on October 22nd, that's a Saturday night, at the 5th Annual Body Slams for Bonnie Eagle at Bonnie Eagle High School in, I'm going to sound stupid, I believe that's in Buxton, Maine, starting at 7 p.m.
Spanish.
Buxton, okay. I should know that. I'm from the town over. So the show will be headlined by WWE Hall of Famer Mr. USA Tony Atlas, and the special guest general manager for the evening will be John Cena Sr. Everybody, welcome Flash Nick McKenna to the show. Flash, thank you for taking some time and joining the program.
Thank you so much, Eric. I'm very happy to be talking to you.
So we've known each other for quite a while. I believe the first time that I met you was in 2002, but let's go a little further back than that. What was it about wrestling when you were younger that kind of piqued your interest? I know personally, I was a huge Hulkamaniac, and that was kind of what got me into watching. So, what are the origins of Flash Nick McKenna with the wrestling business?
Well, it goes back to the summer before my 8th grade year. Over the course of 7th grade, I had met and befriended my best friend, Alan, who we grew very close together after he moved into Maine from out of state in 7th grade. And so we did the summer track program together the summer before our 8th grade year, and they had track practices Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then we had meets on Fridays. So we had this running system for 5 or 6 weeks where we would meet up, we'd do track practice on Monday, and then we would walk to his house, which was very nearby the school, and I would spend the Monday nights with him, and then Tuesday we'd go back to track practice. And he watched wrestling. And so, wanting to be a good guest, I just watched with him. And I remember the very first time I remember watching it and thinking, wow, this is really something to get into. I believe it was WCW Monday Nitro, and I want to say it was a match between Juventud Guerrero Ra and Rey Mysterio Jr. So, if you're going to be introduced to wrestling for the first time, might as well be those guys. But, I remember I got right into it right away and started following all the storylines, and he and I would talk about it and get into it. We started watching the pay-per-views regularly. And then independent promotion came into Portland called EWA, and they started running shows at the Stevens Avenue Armory in Portland. And, we would go to those shows regularly and follow them, and then just became engrossed. And I fell in love with the spectacle of it and the drama of it, and these larger-than-life characters that, made everything big and cool.
Totally understand. Yeah, so you were more of an Attitude Era guy, where personally I started very, very young in what's called, or often referred to as, the Golden Age, where it was Hulk Hogan and Jake the Snake Roberts, Ultimate Warrior, and then the business as a whole really hit a lull during the kind of early to mid-90s, and then when Nitro launched and the Monday Night Wars, I feel like that's when the majority of people got into it, and it kind of morphed into what you see today. So I can totally understand that. And Rey Mysterio Jr., obviously one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, no matter what size. And also Juventud Guerrero, I feel, he kind of had a bit of a penchant for having, I guess you could call it, a diva attitude, and he only really had a cup of coffee in the WWE, so he often gets forgotten about. But with the advent of the network, I think a lot of people will start to discover that again, especially with the Cruiserweight division being relaunched.
Yeah, dude, exactly. I was thinking the exact same thing recently. Just recently, a couple weeks ago, I sat down because I knew I didn't want to have to wait. So I sat down, I waited till the end, and I sat down and watched the entire Cruiserweight Classic from front to back in a weekend.
Yeah, I remember seeing you say something on social media about that.
Yeah, and it was obviously fantastic.
Phenomenal.
And I remember thinking the same thing, that, with the network, the whole new cruiserweight division is going to get people remembering the old WCW cruiserweight division, which really was what made me fall in love with wrestling in the first place.
Exactly.
Because I was,
there was so many guys
Sorry?
from that era that really get forgotten about.
Yeah.
Obviously Rey Mysterio was the biggest name, but you had your Billy Kidmans, Chris Jericho obviously became a bigger name, Dean Malenko, who I feel is extremely underrated because he never really had that huge boisterous personality. But yeah, the network is great. Not that I need to plug that at all because they're obviously doing very well on their own.
Yeah.
All right, so moving forward.
Because I was a bit.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
Well, I was just going to say that I was a bit of an unusual case because not only did I start watching wrestling much later than the average wrestling fan starts watching wrestling. So I was 13 or 14, but also, I was a WCW exclusive guy for like the first year and a half that I watched wrestling. I didn't even bother with WWF because, in my own eyes as this, wrestling newbie, WCW was a better product.
Right.
And then as I got more and more into wrestling, I just hungered for more of it, and so I started following the WWF as well, and then getting their pay-per-views and all that stuff. But yeah, I was kind of, I guess you could call me an unusual case because I was big. I was Mr. WCW all the way.
Right. I don't think you're too unusual because at the time, WCW was white hot, and mainly because of the New World Order angle, but then they started filtering in all those cruiserweights, and that was something, you said you didn't start watching until that time, but previous to that, you never saw high flying like those guys were doing. It was always the big bulked up bodybuilder type builds. You got a little bit of the smaller guys that started to really make a name for themselves, like Bret Hitman Hart and Shawn Michaels. But still, primarily, it was the bigger guys. So seeing smaller guys in the incredible work rate that they had really sucked a lot of people in and stuck them with WCW at the time, on top of all the huge names that they had as well, like your Stings, your Ric Flairs, your Hulk Hogans, and that whole New World Order angle. So I have always been a WWE, WWF guy, but I'm not ashamed to admit that I definitely watched a lot more WCW during that time, just because the product was so red hot. So back to you.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, back to Mr. Flash Nick McKenna. So you mentioned EWA, and I believe that the Armory on Stevens Avenue was when I first met you, and I want to say I may have been a junior in high school, and I remember thinking to myself, because I know that we're very close in age, I think that you might be like maybe a year or two older than me, but I remember thinking to myself, like, holy crap, this guy is really young. Like, not that I knew that I never quite had the frame, or I guess really the passion to step into the ring myself, but I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, this guy is really young and is almost an inspiration for younger people that want to get into the business. So, going back, what do you remember about training for the ring, being a younger guy? Was that more difficult because you were younger? What were some of the harder elements about stepping into the ring for you?
Well, for me, I think that the hardest thing was the fact that, as a younger guy, I was a bit awkward. I was nervous around these people who I was trying to learn from. I worried about saying the wrong thing or looking like a fool, or messing up.
Right.
And
actually, if I could interject for a second, I remember seeing, and I don't know if you remember this or not, but there was one show, and I don't know how many people remember him because his most notable, I guess, if you want to call it a segment, was as a member of WCW with Rick Fuller. So I can totally imagine.
Yep.
Yeah, he was one of the guys that got kind of plowed over during Goldberg's streak. So that had to definitely be intimidating for sure.
Yeah, and, I mean, it was. And I mean, even just stepping down from that, you know, because like I said, I had gone to the EWA shows regularly for, you know, probably pretty close to a year before, you know, they had made an announcement at one show saying, hey, if you want to learn how to wrestle, come join us here at whatever they call their program. You know, so I've been watching these guys for close to a year already. And so even you know, the more local guys who hadn't had national exposure were still, like, in my mind, you know, obviously they were older than me too, so, you know, I felt like the kid around them. But, I feel like...
How old were you when you started your training, by the way?
I think I was 17 years old when I started. I know I had my first match when I was 18 years old. I was a senior in high school.
Okay.
I believe it was October of 2001.
Okay.
And but yeah, I started training with them, and primarily with Larry Huntley, who is pretty well known around the entire New England area, even still nowadays.
Yeah,
still performing and still training.
Most people would know him as Cousin Larry. He definitely wrestles a lot in all of New England. I've even seen him earlier this year at a show in Winslow, Massachusetts that featured Sting, and Lex Luger was there as well, just to throw that out there for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely, I believe over the course of last summer, I think he was in Georgia once or twice. So he gets out there. And I'm very grateful to him because he trained me right, and you know, he taught me about respect and you know, listening. You know, because for a young guy, sometimes it's hard to listen. You know, you want to go, even though it's really not your time.
Right.
And you know, and he trained me. I'm very, very grateful for the training that he gave me. And then when I started getting to the point in my training when I was starting to be able to, they were starting to consider being able to use me in actual shows. It was right around, I remember it was right around the time of 9/11.
Yes.
And so, of course, we lost the Armory because everything went on high alert.
Right.
And so EWA wound up going on hiatus. I'm actually remembering now that it wasn't the fall, it would have been the spring of 2002 that my first match was, because EWA was shut down after 9/11 for, I want to say, 4 or 5 months at least, before we were able to start running again, because we couldn't use the Armory. I think everything was all, you know, everything had been activated and deployed and so on and so forth. Everything was on high alert. And I remember after however many months of inactivity, they finally did book a show at the Howard Sports Arena in Saco, Maine. And that was where I had my first match. I was in a 4-way elimination match where I was pinned by Johnny Curtis, who the fans would now know as Fandango.
Oh, no kidding. I actually did not know that. That's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, very interesting.
And I want to say that was, if it wasn't his very first, it was one of his very first matches that he wrestled as Johnny Curtis. Because before that, he had been in a mask and wrestled with a different moniker.
Right. For those that don't know, his given first name is actually Kurt, so that's kind of how the Johnny Curtis name came about. And he is from a rival high school of mine, which it was Bonnie Eagle, I'm pretty sure that he went to.
I want to say he went to Westbrook.
Was it Westbrook? I know that he's from that same area anyway.
Yeah, it's that same area-ish. But, and so then, with EWA, they started me as a heel, and then shortly after I first started, they threw me into a stable that they had going at the time called the Hardcore Institute, and I ran with them for a while and started teaming with a guy called Garth Garrison out of Massachusetts. He and I became EWA Tag Team Champions for several months, and then right about the same time as the EWA had to take another hiatus for other reasons, the Hardcore Institute disbanded. That wasn't a thing anymore, and so everybody was kind of lost in their way. You know, we were on hiatus for a long time. I want to say almost a year that EWA went without running any shows in Maine. We were still running shows in Massachusetts and I believe also Rhode Island.
Mm-hmm.
But we weren't running any shows in Maine for a long time. And then, when we did finally get back, when we got the Armory back, we started going again. Garth Garrison had stopped wrestling after we lost the titles, and they threw me into another tag team with a guy called Cue Ball. And it was kind of a strange thing because, like, over the course of the time, I feel like they had kind of gotten to know my actual personality. You know, and in real life, I pride myself on making a concerted effort to be a very personable and friendly person.
I can,
I like.
Yeah, I can 100% vouch for that. Just to,
Yeah.
I know you personally, and to put you over a little bit, you're one of the friendliest dudes I've ever met. So.
Yeah, it's my ultimate goal to be the nicest person anyone who's met me has ever met.
Well, you're doing good at it, I think.
Yeah, but so I feel like I was able once I got to know everybody and got more comfortable in the environment, they started to kind of maybe see a different way to take that. Because at first I was just this mean, nasty guy as a heel, which was difficult for me because that's not me at all.
Right.
And so I made some adjustments to my character to the point where I was the cocky heel. So I still got to smile, I still got to, accept a positive thing, but, I just didn't understand why people were booing me because, they got to see me. Why are they so upset?
Right.
And, I tried to adopt that kind of a thing. But then they ran me in this thing with Cue Ball where I believe they actually billed us like on posters and things like that as the odd couple. And he was supposed to be this big, tough guy, no-nonsense guy who just wanted to fight. And I was like this goofy guy who wanted to be his friend.
Okay.
So the dynamic was that he tolerated me.
So that's almost like
it was strange because
it kind of sounds a little bit like a rock and sock connection kind of a dynamic, I guess, with you playing.
It is kind of like that.
Yeah, you kind of playing the Mankind role.
Exactly, but the problem was that we were still heels, and I feel like it never worked as well as it could have because of that. Because he could be a heel, no problem. He was Mr. Tough Guy, but I was supposed to. So it kind of took away. Because I'm obviously not Mr. Mean and Nasty because I want to be this guy's friend.
Right.
And I'm obviously not Mr. Coffee. I'm obviously not Mr. Coffee because I care about whether or not he likes me.
Right. See, a lot of this stuff.
It was kind of a.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff is new to me because I ended up moving away from Maine to Florida for a number of years. So personally, I didn't even know whatever happened to EWA or anything like that.
Mm. Well, EWA was run by two guys at once, Scott King and Steve Rand. And Scott King was based in Massachusetts and Steve Rand was based here in Maine. And then what wound up happening is that Steve Rand had found an opportunity and wound up moving out of state to Arizona. So there was nobody really to do any kind of promotion here in Maine. So EWA ran for another year and a half or so in Massachusetts and Rhode Island and things like that, and then just kind of fizzled out, really.
So was that?
And then
was that around the time? I know. So you've been wrestling almost for 15 years now, but I know that you did take a few years off. Was that around the time that you kind of took a hiatus?
Well, that was my first hiatus, and that was just 100% due to just a lack of bookings. There weren't any bookings anyway.
Right. The scene in Maine, even before I moved.
Yeah, it really just kind of disappeared.
Yeah, it disappeared entirely.
Yeah, and it was rough, so I had just kind of put it away for a little while, and then I had a brief period where they were running shows in Buxton at Skip's Bar. I can't even remember the name of the promotion, but they were running shows at Skip's Bar, and so there was a chance to get back in the ring a little bit there. And then, but that was a temporary thing. And then I took my big hiatus.
Okay.
Where? Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. Shortly after that, I started working shows in Fairfield, Maine, which is a decent amount of travel for me.
Yeah, that's.
But I was working those shows once a month. Yeah, and I was able to be successful there. It was actually one of my first experiences as actually getting to be a babyface, because in EWA I wound up turning babyface by accident one day, because they had a mismatched card, and so they wound up putting a match together with me and Cue Ball versus another heel tag team called the Elements of Suicide. And so they just wound up cheering for us. And then there was a turn, Cue Ball turning on me, and so that was like this accidental thing that I wound up turning babyface, and that was the very last EWA show in Maine.
Okay.
And then Cue Ball and I had a grudge match against each other in Massachusetts, but because obviously it's a completely different crowd, because of how our characters were portrayed there, we had a grudge match, and I was the heel.
Right.
Even though I got turned on.
Obviously, that storyline was mainly run here in Maine, so the fans down there wouldn't know what the hell was going on.
Yeah, I mean, they still knew, they had still seen us team together before down in Massachusetts, but they didn't know what had happened with the turn up here. So I was 100% heel for the longest time, and then when I started working in Fairfield, they used me as a babyface, and I feel like that's when I really got to discover the character that works best for me, because I've always had this belief that the best wrestling characters are either the complete opposite of your own personality. It's an opportunity for you to exercise the parts of yourself you don't normally, or they're just your own personality cranked up to 10.
Exactly.
Which is what works for me.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same across the board, whether you're wrestling independently or you're in TNA or WWE. Everybody always says that the best characters are the most believable ones, because you can be yourself with the volume, like you said, cranked completely up.
Yeah, and so that's what I wound up doing, and so I became fun guy, Flash Nick McKenna. I wanted to hang out with everybody. I wanted to be everybody's friend. I like to goof off and have a good time, and and I feel like that was the time where I was able to be most successful, because I was it was so much easier for me. It felt so much more natural that the crowd responded to it more because it wasn't so forced.
Right.
And so that was a promotion called PWA, Pro Wrestling Alliance, that ran in Fairfield for I want to say about a year. I ran with them, and I had a run with them. I became PWA New England champion. I got to be in a triple threat ladder match with Scotty Vegas and Cameron Matthews, which was a lot of fun. And then I wound up, that was when I took my big hiatus, and I didn't step into a wrestling ring for 5 years.
Yeah, that was
until
just to throw that out there for everybody, even though they're wrestling independent guys, they're still real people and real life things come up. And not that it was anything negative, because it totally wasn't, but I don't want to put any of your personal stuff out there, but it was the wife and the kids and stuff like that. So things do happen, and even when you're at these indie shows, like I think a lot of fans, or even watching on WWE, tend to forget that you're still a person, you're still a human being. So things happen.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what happened for me, is that they're just, at that point in time, especially with the significant amount of travel that the Fairfield shows were causing. But then, what had happened, what had kicked off my hiatus was that they had lost their Fairfield venue. And so the closest booking I could get from there was in Brewer, Maine, which was like 2 hours even further, and just completely and totally impractical for me.
Right.
So I said, okay, well, and then and that was actually even a different promotion called IWE, which still runs to this day now.
Right. Who are still around, and I believe they still run shows in. I want to say they run shows in Fairfield now.
They run shows in Fairfield and Brewer and Skowhegan, all around that sort of middle section of Maine. It's not northern Maine, because there's a good 500 more miles up north ahead of them. They're northern to us.
Right. Maine is much bigger than a lot of people realize. For those that actually do realize we are a state, because I remember living in Florida, I even had people ask me if Maine was a part of Canada. So no, we are not a part of Canada.
Yeah.
However, we are one of the bigger states in the New England region. Yeah,
I want to say that square mileage wise, I think we're second to Massachusetts.
Yes, I believe you.
But the reason, people don't think of Maine as being big, obviously, because of our very, very small population. Right. I want to say, last I checked, there's 3 million people, I think, in all of Maine.
Right.
Which, of course, is less than half of there is just on Manhattan Island.
I believe like half of that population is in our area, too, which is the Portland, Maine area as well. So there's definitely a lot of woods once you start getting up towards, like Jackman,
exactly.
Moosehead Lake, and those kind of areas. Other than Portland, I'm pretty sure Bangor would be the second biggest market in Maine.
Yeah, the greater Portland area is easily the biggest market that we have here. But then you have Augusta and things like that also up that are decent sized markets. But then IWE, they started making the trek down here, and they had a show. They started running shows at Clashers in South Portland, and so I contacted the promoter, Eric Johnson. I said, "Hey, Eric, I don't know if you remember me from PWA, but if there's room for me on the card, at your South Portland show, I'd love to get a chance to get back out there." And he said, "Sure, of course, absolutely." And I had my first match in 5 years on September 18th, 2 years ago. where I wrestled Hockey Kyle Andrews.
So what?
And
Were during your time off, were you kind of still thinking about the business? Did you really have the itch that whole time, or did you kind of completely fall out just because life can get in the way? Were you still watching at all? Anything like that?
I was still watching a little bit. Especially the network has been helping because I completely and totally fell out of touch with the whole wrestling scene based solely on the fact that I just I just don't have cable.
Right.
So I don't have any way to watch it. The network is obviously helping a lot with that, and I'm able to kind of keep up more with what's happening in mainstream wrestling.
It's so much more, I guess, this isn't quite the term I'm looking for, but like fiscally doable to have the network if you're a wrestling
absolutely.
fan. Especially for, again, they don't need the plug, but even just for the pay-per-views alone, which if you get them through cable are going to be $40, $50. It's been so long since I've ordered a pay-per-view, I don't even remember how much they are because I have the network.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I know last time I ordered a pay-per-view, we were like, this was like 8 years ago, if not longer. The last time I ordered a pay-per-view, I believe it was WrestleMania.
Yeah, WrestleMania.
And I remember it being like, and it was like $60.
Yeah, WrestleMania alone is
WrestleMania alone is half of what you pay for the network for a year.
Exactly. Which WrestleMania is crazy. I want to say SummerSlam maybe more expensive as well, since they've kind of put that one to a 4-hour show too. I'm not positive on that.
But I know that I remember when I first heard about the network, I thought to myself, that can't be right. How could they possibly? How could that be profitable for them? And then somebody pointed out to me that that money doesn't go to the cable company; it goes straight to WWE.
Right.
And I was like, well, that makes sense. And so now WWE is making all this money directly from their fans, and I think they're probably making more because more people are paying instead of skipping the $30 a month for the pay-per-view, they're paying the $10 a month that they would have gotten as their share from the cable company anyway.
Right.
To be able
I think a lot of fans, because ordering through cable or satellite or whatever, it's so expensive that you might only get one pay-per-view a year, whereas if you have the network, you're almost guaranteed to have those people around for a full year. So instead of getting, say, for example, $30 for what was the most recent one, No Mercy, you're getting $120 for someone for the entire year.
Exactly. And I mean, I also you have to take into consideration the fact that $30 that somebody's paying for No Mercy, only a chunk of that is actually going to WWE. The rest of it's going to the cable company.
Exactly. So they've completely cut out the middleman.
Yeah, and put the savings onto the fans, which is just better for wrestling in general.
Exactly.
Because people are gonna be more passionate about it if they get to see those pay-per-views where the meaningful stuff really happens, where idol matches happen, and so on and so forth. And I know that for me, it was I didn't care as much if I wasn't being able to see those pay-per-views, because you watch the shows and it all leads up to the pay-per-view, and if you don't get to see that, you just get results afterwards.
Exactly. You're not going to go and order the $30 replay the next day because you've already seen what happened.
Yeah.
Or not seen, but read about.
Yeah, or it's been announced or whatever.
Exactly.
I mean, I remember it was Starrcade, right, with Goldberg and Diamond Dallas Page.
That was Halloween Havoc in 1998, and I think I know where you're going with this. Where they had the show ran long, and everybody that had ordered, or maybe not everybody, but a large portion of the people that had ordered the pay-per-view, which under breath I was watching on one of those old boxes where you could get all the pay-per-views for free. Don't come after me, feds. But yeah,
I don't even know what you're talking. I don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know what just came out of my mouth. But yeah, people
But,
that had ordered that, the main event got cut off from them, so the very next night on Nitro, they showed the main event in its entirety, so they had to basically give it away for free.
Yeah, and that was, but I think that for me, it was one thing to, like obviously it was extremely frustrating, because, I mean, right in the middle of Goldberg's entrance, everybody's table box is just cut out. That's it. Like, that's what you paid for, that's all you're going to get, and of course it's live, and you're done. So, for me, the biggest, like, most frustrating moment was I was there and I was watching, not Brian Heyman, what was the guy's name right out there? He was there with
are you talking
Brian
about
McKenna and Tanay.
It was Shivani, Mike Tenay, and Bobby Heenan.
Yeah, Shivani is what I'm thinking of. So he's there and he's all like, so we're very sorry, we apologize for everybody's inconvenience, and we're going to be showing that main event match right here on Nitro, live for everybody to see. And then later we'll have Diamond Dallas Page versus Bret Hart for the U.S. Championship. And I remember thinking, are you freaking kidding me?
Right.
I mean, this was before the term existed, but it would have been a perfect time to spot. Spoiler alert.
Exactly.
Because, of course, they're not going to book Diamond Dallas Page in a U.S. title match if he won the world title.
Right, exactly. So this was kind
of course, and of course, it was a great match. I believe it won Match of the Year, for WCW in their, yearly wrap-up or whatever. I believe it won Match of the Year.
Yeah, it may have. I don't recall. I'm not positive on that one.
And I remember thinking to myself, I don't remember that match being so great, probably because I knew who was going to win.
Exactly. Yeah, that definitely retracts quite a bit from it. It was easily, I guess it's kind of topical that we're on talking about Goldberg, that he's now going to be coming back to WWE. But it was by far the best match Goldberg ever had.
Oh, absolutely. It was exciting, and there were lots of near falls, and it was executed properly, which is always good.
All right, so let's jump. Let's jump right back to you. You had mentioned that your first match you got pinned by the man now known as Fandango, and you also worked on some cards with former WCW superstar Rick Fuller. You just recently were on a card with Ring of Honor's Donovan Dijak. So, are there any other kind of, not necessarily big names, but notable names that people would know that you've interacted with, been in the ring with, performed on the same card with?
I wrestled. I actually lost the PWA New England Championship to Tommy Mack, who I believe had been on WCW television.
No kidding. Yeah, I actually know who that is. I do know that name.
Yeah, and then let's see. I had been at a show where Scott Taylor, obviously, who is very popular down here.
Yep.
Scotty Too Hottie.
Yeah, for those that don't know, Scotty Too Hottie is from Westbrook High School. He now lives in Tampa, and of course is now a trainer at the WWE Performance Center.
And other than that, I don't know if I can think of anyone that people would necessarily. I mean, obviously, Tony Atlas has been at Body Slams and Bonnie Eagle for the past 3 years running, I believe.
Right. He also lives.
So, I've gotten to meet Tony several times.
Yeah, I believe I met him last year at a show. I can't remember. I want to say it was in Winslow, Maine, where Scott Taylor was also there, Kevin Nash. Scott Hall, but I believe Tony lives in the Bangor area, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know, but
Yeah,
he's here in Maine somewhere.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I mean, there's probably not too many people that can say my first match was against a WWE superstar. Obviously, he wasn't at the time, so I mean, that's a great story to have.
Yeah, no, it's a little fun fact about Flash Nick McKenna.
I mean, I've known you for quite some time now, and I was not even aware of that.
Well, I mean,
are you holding out on
neither
me, bro?
was I until. Well, no, I mean, you have to understand that neither was I aware of the fact that I had been pinned by Johnny Curtis for the first few years you and I knew each other, because Johnny Curtis wasn't Johnny Curtis yet.
Right, exactly.
You know, of course, I believe, what was it, 4 or 5 years ago that he won whatever season it was of NXT.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Back when NXT was a show and not a promotion.
He was never a part of the NXT that we all know now. He was in developmental for them, which I guess was kind of the origins of NXT, Florida Championship Wrestling. But at that time, NXT was only... it was a really gimmicky show. I can't even... It might have been on, like, Sci-Fi or something like that, but it was definitely not...
Yeah, and it was like, it had like a reality show format where, you know, they were eliminated week to week until they had they culminated in the ultimate winner.
Yeah, it was brutal.
Yeah, the first season of NXT obviously won by Wade Barrett. And then the second season was won by Caval, who fizzled out and was never utilized properly. Most people would probably know him as Low Key.
Yep, definitely made his name in TNA, I believe. I want to say he still wrestles in, like, Japan. I'm not positive on that. I'm sure somebody will correct me if I'm wrong. I think probably the biggest superstar to come out of that show, aside from, you know, season 1 had Wade Barrett and Daniel Bryan, and we saw the Nexus group, which also had Heath Slater and Darren Young and the man who would end up becoming Ryback. But AJ Lee, I would argue, was probably the biggest... Or no, she did not win that, but she was on one season. I believe that season was won by Caitlyn. But yeah, it definitely was not...
I honestly don't know.
Yeah, it definitely was not what fans would know now as NXT. So yeah, let's get back to Mr. Flash. So I know that you have wrestled for Limitless, who has really made a name for themselves in this area, and you also wrestle for Impulse Pro, which I believe is co-owned kind of by the same guy as Limitless and then another party. Were there any other organizations in this area that you wrestled for that you didn't mention already?
Well, no, I mentioned the IWE, which hasn't been running shows here in the Greater Portland area for some time, so I haven't been able to work with those guys for a while. Even though I would like to, because they were fine people to work with and be around. But no, for the past, IWE ran at Thatcher's for about a year and a half, I want to say, and then another local party had decided that he wanted to try and start his own promotion. I believe there was kind of a breakdown behind the scenes, where my own interpretation of the situation was that there was an understanding, on somebody's side that IWE was not going to run at Thatcher's anymore. So this other gentleman said, "Oh, well, the wrestling at Thatcher's has been so successful. Let's keep it going. We'll start our own thing. We have everybody's contact and so on and so forth." And that turned out not to be accurate, but it wasn't found out until after everything for this whole brand new promotion had already been set up. And so there was this awkward few months where both promotions were running at Thatcher's, and there was, this bit of tension between them, and then ultimately IWE stopped running at Thatcher's, and then we got and then it was called PWS at the time, and then we ran there for a year. Over the course of that time, being renamed to Impulse Pro. And then our last show there was on the 7th of September, where Copy Highlanders and I, 2 years after I made my comeback, wrestled each other once again in a number one contendership ladder match. Of course, you were there.
Yes.
And it was a great match. It was a great show. And unfortunately, that is going to be the last show we ever have at Thatcher's.
Yeah, I've heard that. There's been a lot of drama, I guess you could say, between without getting too involved, because I don't really know too much about it, and we obviously don't want to put anybody on blast. But although the indie wrestling scene in Maine is really starting to blow up of late, there was a lot of issues between those promoters, which kind of sucks for me personally, because that venue, Thatcher's Restaurant, is only like 5 minutes away from my house. So,
and we were very successful there. I mean, and I was told by a bunch of people that we were bringing in lots of business for the restaurant and so on and so forth, and it was very lucrative for everybody.
The last show
was, it was lucrative for...
The last show was jam-packed.
Yeah, last show was... Yeah, exactly. That ladder match was a big draw for a lot of people. And, it was very successful for everybody. I mean, particularly for the promoters, because the deal there was Thatcher's would just let them use the space for free in exchange for the business that the wrestling brought in. So, similar to Thatcher's would pay a band in order to get people in the door, we just called it a wash. We got to keep the gate, and they would get their business bumped up.
Right, because everybody that was going to those
lucrative
shows was ordering food and drinking beer, so it's not like they were losing out at all on that.
Yeah, no, it was a very lucrative business. It was a very lucrative, deal for both sides. Unfortunately, ultimately, what did us in is that the fire marshal walked in there one day and saw the ring set up and pointed out that, unbeknownst to anybody previously, that apparently certain codes did not allow the ring to be in the building.
Right. Which again,
just kind of...
Again, there's been a lot of rumors about how that kind of came about, and personally, in my own opinion, I don't know how true that is. I don't really want to go too much into that, but in my own opinion, the fact that whoever it is can't get along, it's not just hurting the promoters, but it's also hurting you guys as wrestlers, and it's really hurting the fans.
Yeah. And it's hurting the whole Maine wrestling scene, because as we spoke about earlier, the greater Portland area is easily our biggest market. That's where the biggest concentration of people are. So that's where you're going to get butts and seats. And so, Thatcher's was basically for 2 years, Thatcher's was the capital of Greater Portland wrestling. There was no other wrestling happening anywhere within 2 hours of Thatcher's.
Right.
And so, now we've, Limitless was able to run their first Greater Portland area show at the Western Armory a week ago tomorrow. And that was a very good show, very successful show, which was supposed to be Impulse Pro, which actually, I need to correct you, it's actually been renamed yet again to Let's Wrestle.
Okay, I did see that name on social media. I kind of spaced on it. for those that don't know, Limitless is really doing some innovative stuff in Maine. You performed. That was your first show for them, right?
That was my first. That was my first opportunity to work with Limitless.
Yeah, because they've been running. They've been running all of their other shows up in the Orono area, which, they're close to Bangor, which is a fairly big market. But like we said before, this Portland area that you and I both live kind of surrounding of is the biggest market in Maine.
Yeah.
So the Limitless shows where which we were a part of this, they got to do something pretty special recently where current WWE superstar Lince Dorado had his final independent match. However, it's for someone like me having to trek up there 3 hours, and the show ends at 11:30, and then you have to trek back another 3 hours. I didn't even get home until 2:30 in the morning. So I'm definitely looking forward to them having more shows in this area, and I think once they start having more shows in this area, the crowd is just going to grow more and more. Obviously, they'll lose a little bit of the fan base from Orono because now those people won't want to make the trek down here. But it's more popular.
But they'll find plenty of new people down here. I mean, there was I believe they said it was 150 at the Armory a week ago, and they had literally announced that show 10 days prior.
Yeah, there was not a lot of build-up for that show, and they even...
No, because that date...
I was surprised that they were able to get Donovan Dijak on such short notice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that date was supposed to be the next Thatcher show. Like, that was on paper already. And then when Thatcher's went down, that's when Limitless was said, it just so happened that it was right around the same time that we had found out that Thatcher's was a no-go, that he had made contact with the Armory and found that opportunity for that building and said, okay, well, hey, let's, people are already signed up to go see wrestling on that day, so let's try and jump on it. And it worked out well.
Yeah, I think it was a success.
With 10 days promotion, he was able to get 150 people in there, which was bigger than any crowd we ever had at Thatcher's.
Yeah,
simply for the fact that we couldn't fit that many in there.
Exactly, unless you did, even if you did an outdoor show, which always presents a number of problems, especially getting into this time of year around here, you still could maybe get 50 people at the most around that outdoor little patio that they have.
I want to say, I believe we've crested 100 a couple times there at Thatcher's over the course of the 2 years we ran there, across a couple promotions. But and we did run shows outdoors. For me, my understanding is that the biggest issue that they had with the outdoor shows, which we would sometimes, for people who don't know, we would sometimes have the ring outdoors in a lot next to the building, and people would sit around there. And, obviously it gave us more room to work with, it made everybody more comfortable, because it was a pretty cramped room inside. But the biggest issue, if I understand properly, is that the biggest issue is just making sure that everybody paid. Because people could just kind of wander in. There was no room to have an entrance that you could have somebody at to expect people to come and buy their ticket at.
Right, there was a gate coming from the restaurant area. However, people could just walk up from, say, the parking lot without without paying for their ticket. So you were having people that were paying for their ticket, actually giving money, and then just having, I guess, kind of freelancers stroll in without paying anything at all.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was told that was the biggest hurdle to get over, because people were calling for the shows to be outdoors, because like I said, obviously it's much more, and for us to have, for the people who don't know, there's a height issue inside the building at Thatcher's, and so for us to have that ladder match, in there, it was pretty cramped. I mean, we still made everything work, and it was easily one of the best matches of my career.
Yeah, your finish move, for those that don't know, which I also coined a new nickname for you, the Pharaoh of the Flash Splash. However, you couldn't do that inside. You could only do it off the second rope because
I wasn't able to come off the top rope because...
Yeah, it wasn't even a ceiling. It was, I'm forgetting
what
they're
it was
called now.
rafters.
I should remember because I used to work in construction, but yeah, unless you wanted to end up with a concussion, you couldn't even go to the top rope.
Yeah. Okay, you could go to the top rope for certain moves if you were doing like a diving elbow or something, but for the people who haven't seen it, the Flash Splash is sort of like a missile drop kick and a frog splash on a baby. So I have to jump up, tuck my legs up underneath, and then fly feet first towards my target. Which is why, in Thatcher's I was primarily using the Flash Back, which is a spinning sort of sit-out powerbomb-like move. I don't know, how would you describe the flashback?
The flashback to me, which I love the flashback, to be honest with you, because the first time that you did that, I had never really seen anything like that before, but I would describe it as starting off as almost like a razor's edge, and then you kind of spin it into a sit-out powerbomb. And also for those that don't know, the Flash Splash would be a little bit similar to what people would know now as, say, the Twisted Bliss, which is Alexa Bliss's move. But now that I think about it, now that you said you were a WCW fan originally, was the inspiration for that move from the old cruiserweight Kaz Hayashi? Because I remember him, that was the first time I saw a move like that was from him. Was that kind of where you got the inspiration for that from?
I honestly, I don't recognize that name. I probably would recognize the face and the gear if you showed him to me. But I do know that the very first time I ever saw somebody do that feet first splash was Elix Skipper.
Okay, yep. That would have been around
and I remember thinking, oh, hey. Yeah, I remember thinking, oh, hey, that's cool. That's original. I've never seen anybody do that before.
Yeah,
and,
Kaz would have been in WCW about that same time. I don't know if you recall. Or at
the
that
name
time,
does sound familiar, but...
Yeah, at that time he would have been in a group called the Young Dragons. I don't know if that rings a bell or not. I know, it was so long ago. We're getting long in the tooth, brother.
Yeah, we certainly are.
All right, a couple.
But,
couple more things before we get you out of here that I just wanted to touch on, because I think that you have a great story where you started so young, and there's a lot of people that kind of sit back and will watch wrestling and be like, oh, okay, I can totally do that without entirely knowing what they're getting into. So for anybody that's thinking about training to be a wrestler or go to wrestling school, what would be your biggest advice for them and some of the biggest challenges that they would face?
Well, for me, the best advice that I got and can give is to simply be a sponge. Just soak up everything that you see and hear, and and don't be afraid to ask questions. Just be open to receiving all the information and understanding that even if you don't get why something is a certain way, that it's that way for a reason.
Exactly.
And it's, because it's hard. Anytime you break into anything new, you try to learn to ski or something like that. It's a struggle. Any new skill you try to pick up. Wrestling, for me, the physicality of it came. I don't want to boast, but I think it came more naturally to me than the average person.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, the performance aspect of it is really, you know, what drew me in.
Right.
And I you know, certainly anybody who I've wrestled a gentleman by the name of Gino Bauer, who you know, Eric.
Yep, I do.
Who who's 42 years old, and I believe only just started wrestling 3 years ago. Like consistently. Like I think he had been in training in his late 20s, early 30s for a period of time, and he got discouraged because the people around him weren't taking him seriously. You know, they thought it was a little silly. But, you know, years later, he went back and he got more serious about it, and, you know, and he's a fine performer. I mean, there's still lots that, you know, that my, let's say, 8 years of active wrestling, you know, that I have, that he's still working on. But there's still things that every performer struggles with from time to time, no matter who you are. Exactly. You know, about, you know, pacing your matches properly and making sure that you are working to the crowd. Because obviously, especially here in the independent level, we don't have cameras, we don't have close-ups to make sure that the fans get the action. You know, we've got to involve the crowd.
Right.
That's how independent wrestling shows are successful.
A lot more intimate setting as well, too.
Yeah. And I mean, I've said this before, and I still believe it's true, that at least, if not more, at least 70% of whether or not a wrestling show is worth going to see is whether or not there's energy from the crowd.
Right.
Like, the crowd is responsible for whether or not a wrestling show is good way more than they know.
Yep. Shout out to hashtag Scott the Heat Guy as well, which people listening might not know who he is, but if he hears it, I'm sure he'll pop.
Yes, exactly. I mean, and he's a prime example. He's sort of like an unofficial hype man. He goes out there, he starts chants, he gets people going. I think at the Limitless show, I even heard him actually say, "Hey guys, come on, they're working hard for us. Let's give them something."
Multiple times.
Or something along those lines.
Yeah, multiple times.
And you know, and it's, you know, if you don't have any energy from the crowd, which is ultimately our responsibility to draw that out as the performers.
Right.
But if it's not there for whatever reason, whether it's, you know, a small crowd, because I mean, obviously if you're wrestling in front of 17 people, which I've done before, it's really difficult to get anything from them because there's only 17 of them. And so anytime anybody cheers, they feel like the one person being loud in a quiet room.
Exactly.
You know, but and I feel like that's one of the things that really captures a good room, is even though it was cramped in there, it made everything more. Every reaction you got from the crowd was so much bigger because it was right in your face. And it was sort of like a mosh pit.
Yeah, it was.
Maybe that's a bad term, but
it almost had, you know, not to the same extent, but a little bit of the old school ECW arena feel.
Exactly. Like, you know, it was easy to get into it because the guy right next to you was into it.
Right. Just jump back a little bit. I want to expand briefly, which I'm sure you'll agree with this, with anybody who's looking to get into the business. If you can't take a bump, you're porked. So that is obviously...
Yeah, absolutely.
That's going to be one of the biggest things, is the physicality of it, because I think a lot of people think to themselves, like, and I hate to use the word fake, because to me that's just an uneducated opinion, but there is contact on everything.
And I mean, we as performers, we do what we can to limit injuries, either to ourselves or to another person. But Yeah, but like you said, there's contact. I mean, there's plenty of bumps and bruises and things like that. It doesn't take a ladder match to get you feeling sore the next day.
Exactly.
Just a regular standard match. But I mean, it's intimidating for a lot of people when they first start to wrestle and they first have to adjust themselves. I don't know if, I'm sure most of the people listening to this have probably seen programs like the MTV True Life episode where they did pro wrestling, or other such programs.
Yeah, even
where,
Tough Enough.
And it's very standard. Yeah, exactly, or even Tough Enough. And it's very standard. The first thing they have you do is you grab the second rope and you lean back as far as you possibly can and get your back as close to the mat as possible so you have the smallest height to fall from as possible, and you fall from that. And then you move on from there. And it's all about just trying to get yourself comfortable with it. And as I said, I feel like that part came to me fairly quickly, but I acclimated to that, maybe a little quicker than the average. And you really only ever even feel a bump when you're practicing them. Because once you're in a match and the crowd is screaming and you're in performance mode, you don't even care.
Right. You got the adrenaline going, so you're really focused on what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. You got the adrenaline going, and then, everybody who has that first day where they do those, 2-foot bumps, every single person, they wake up the next day and they are wrecked. They are completely wrecked.
Right.
But, your body becomes accustomed to it, and for me, when I made my comeback 2 years ago, I hadn't set foot in the ring for 5 years. I hadn't taken a bump. I hadn't run ropes. I hadn't done anything. And I went in there, and we worked, and I took some decent bumps. I took a spine buster, and, I was okay. There, it really, once you get yourself to the point that you can absorb that impact, then you're good.
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of people.
But it's that process.
Yeah, a lot of people, again, with a very uneducated opinion, they'll see somebody take a bump and say to themselves, well, they know how to fall. But no matter how you spin it, falling flat on your back is not a natural thing for a human being to do.
It is not. And I remember in that first season of Tough Enough, Taz telling these people when somebody had not bumped properly, telling them, look, this doesn't just count here. This is a good skill to have to keep your body safe. Because if I'm at the grocery store and I slip in milk, I'm gonna spread myself out the same way.
Yeah, take a flat back.
And I'm not gonna crack my
take a flat back right on the Hanford floor.
Exactly, and you tuck your chin, and so he's like, if I slip, I'm not gonna break my back, and I'm not gonna crack my head on the floor because I know how to do this. So it's ultimately almost a valuable life skill to just kind of keep your body protected.
Exactly.
And there are, for me, the most difficult thing is when is trying to be on the same page with another person, especially because we don't see each other every week or even every 2 weeks. Usually it's once a month we have these shows. That's when we get together. So it can be difficult to be on the same page and get chemistry with another person. But once you can get there, that's when magic happens.
Exactly. That's the art of it.
And I love it. I always have. I always will. When I was gone for those 5 years, I wouldn't say that I really had the itch, but I know that at any point in time, if somebody had said to me, "Hey, do you want to wrestle?" I would say, "Yes, yes, I do," and I would jump at the chance. And I still do it to this day. I would jump at the chance to wrestle almost any time.
Yeah, you definitely,
And
you got to have a passion for it if this is something that you're going to get into, and you got to really be committed to it. So all right, Flash, we're gonna get ready to wrap things up here. So I guess the final question that I would have for you would be, what kind of goals does Flash Nick McKenna have left in the wrestling business before he hangs up the gear one final time?
Well, I have no plans to hang anything up for a long time. I feel like the sporadicness of my, ability to get bookings is going to help me with that, because I'm not wrestling, 10 or 12 matches a month, so it's not going to be as punishing on my body as somebody who does do that it would be. But a lot of years ago, I resigned myself to the idea that whether it's that I don't have quite that much passion, or whether it's that I just have different priorities. I knew that I was never going to be the kind of person who made their living wrestling. But I certainly would love to spread myself out a little bit more. Maybe try to wrestle further around New England. As I said, I won the PWA New England Championship, which is like their secondary title. I've never held a primary promotion title before in my life, but I certainly would like to, and I'm looking forward to the chance to do so with Let's Wrestle, because obviously after that ladder match, I'm the number one contender.
Yeah, so
and I'm looking forward to that match.
All right, Flash. So on that note, again, you can catch Flash Nick McKenna as North Atlantic Wrestling returns for the 5th annual Body Slams for Bonnie Eagle, which is Saturday night, October 22nd, which will be headlined by Mr. USA Tony Atlas, a WWE Hall of Famer, and the general manager for the evening will be John Cena Sr. Tickets are only $10. And once again, Flash, thank you for joining, and hope you enjoyed speaking to me, even though we catch each other fairly regularly.
Hey, I had a great time. I'd love to talk for another hour, but I don't think anybody wants to listen to it for that long.
I wouldn't go
that
far.
I look forward to seeing you at Bonnie Eagle.
I wouldn't go that far. All right, again, thank you so much, Flash, and I'm sure I'll be talking to you soon.
Thank you.